Okay, I hit 7:02, so other people, if they're coming in, they can come in and catch up from where we are. Um, just want to take a couple of seconds for a couple quick announcements. We've got Bennett's screen sharing, so you're just going to hear me, I think, for these, which is fine. My name is Susan O'Handley. I'm with Delaware-Otsego Audubon. I serve as co-president, and I'm joined this evening for moderator roles tonight, co-president Becky Gretton and board treasurer Charlie Scheim, and our hospitality chair, Catherine Davino, who's just going to keep an eye on and, kind of overall see if anybody has raised hands and help keep track of any questions. For this evening, if you have a question, it's a small group, so we'll go through questions fairly quickly, but if you do have a question, there's a Q&A button on the Zoom control panel. It looks like little chat bubbles, 2 of them, Q&A. You can type your question in there, and that will just help us keep track of what questions have been answered. We'll probably go through Bennett's presentation, and then if there are continued questions after that, because it's a small group, we'll probably shift everybody over and just let us talk. You can ask questions and we can chat a little bit more informally. I do want to just mention that our optics raffle is still taking place. The prizes are some really nice binoculars. They're $10 a ticket, and the proceeds from that support the Audubon Sanctuary and Hawkwatch up at Franklin Mountain. And we've got just a little over half of them remaining. So we have 250 total tickets. I think we're down to 129 remaining for sale. So if you're interested in a chance on a nice pair of Nikon binoculars, you can find information at the website. The other thing that I wanted to mention, this is pretty much the final program, kind of reviewing the steps for carbon reduction that we had overviewed back in December, and then we went into a little bit deeper in January. This is kind of on heating and cooling pieces. We expect that we'll have some more things coming up towards April, May, Earth Day types of events that are climate related. We're talking about possibly doing like an electric owner car show somewhere in the area and getting people there so that people can ask questions. And we will basically let you know about that through our network, through our social media, through our emails, etc. Please join us next Friday, March 19th at 7:30 for Highlights Down Under, which is a photo journey through Tasmania and New Zealand with a local veterinarian, Dr. Pam Lee. And now I'm going to introduce our presenter. So Bennett Sandler started a local business about 12 years ago with 2 others doing residential energy audits and energy efficiency upgrades, including air and ground source heat pump installations. And he is now the campaign director for Heat Smart Mowhawk Valley, which is a community-based education and group purchasing program for clean heating and cooling technologies. Heat Smart Mowhawk Valley seeks to offer residents and businesses the opportunity to improve building comfort and reduce greenhouse gas emissions from heating and cooling by adopting advanced air source, ground source, geothermal heat pumps, and modern wood heating systems, including pellet and wood gasification boilers, as well as EPA certified pellet stoves at a discount from the regional average. So Bennett, if I missed anything, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can let me know if there's anything you'd like to add about yourself, and then you can jump right in.
Excellent. Thanks, Susan. So the only thing that I'd add about myself is that I was fortunate enough when I finished my undergraduate college years to actually bump in and befriend folks from the Galapagos Islands, where upon graduating, I got to spend a year and a half working mostly on avian related research projects, everything from Oh, dark room petrel nesting protection strategies to eradication of smooth-billed annies, which were an introduced species to the Galapagos Islands. So I am a birder at heart, though I spend less time than I'd like to out checking out birds. So I'm always happy and excited to come chat with folks at Delaware-Otsego Audubon Society. And know that, you know, a lot of my interest in a lot of wonky technical energy issues is related to the fact that I see these as solutions, potential solutions to the destruction of habitat and nature that we see happening, as well as the threat of greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. So thank you for the opportunity to present. I think you covered most of it. I will say we've got to work a little bit on the introduction that we actually don't do volume discounted pricing through Heat Smart Mowhawk Valley. We simply connect you with contractors who participate in the utility rebate programs for air and ground source heat pumps. But without further ado, let me get started. Heat Smart Mowhawk Valley is an outgrowth of a earlier campaign that was focused just on the Otsego County called Heat Smart Otsego. We're a NYSERDA funded outreach campaign and a project of the Mohawk Valley Economic Development District and the Otsego County Conservation Association. And we're all about our energy future. We're not alone. We're not the only clean heating and cooling community campaign out there. As you can see from this map, there are a myriad of different campaigns across New York State, mostly through the central New York region. As Heat Smart Mohawk Valley, we picked up the other 5 counties that make up the Mohawk Valley Economic Region as part of our territory. So I was telling Susan, I haven't dovetailed in any slides that actually talk about the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions related to these technologies. I'll touch on them briefly, anecdotally, about what generally you can expect from heat pump technology in terms of greenhouse gas reductions. But what I really focus on a lot is sort of with my financial blinders on the cost benefit around adopting these technologies and what the value proposition is to homeowners. And then add on at the end that, oh yeah, by the way, this is how we actually get to carbon neutrality in New York State by adopting these technologies. And I'll explain that in a little more detail shortly. What I really want to point out is that our focus at Heat Smart Mohawk Valley is really on helping building owners, residential homeowners, or commercial building owners follow a common pathway towards finding solutions for their buildings that are that identify efficiency upgrades and as well as, you know, opportunities to transition to clean energy heating and cooling systems. And the pathway essentially follows these steps that I've listed here, right? Study the problem with an energy audit, evaluate the upgrades that are identified in the energy audit, and those come in a, you know, a distinct list of opportunities. Find incentives to help afford the installation of those upgrades. Find a contractor who's you know, experienced, knowledgeable, and reliable to install those upgrades, and then potentially look for financing to help afford your portion of those upgrades. This is common no matter whether you know, you've got a small tiny house or you're looking at a hospital or a very energy intense building complex or a college campus. This is a common pathway. And so I'll touch on each of these issues. I'll really focus on actually all of these elements. The under upgrades, really the items C, D, and E pertain mostly to larger commercial and industrial buildings. So having said that, let's talk about what kinds of clean heating and cooling technologies I'll be describing today. And the lowest hanging fruit of all technologies is actually what you can do to to reduce the amount of heat your building, your home needs. And that's most typically through envelope improvements, such as adding insulation and air sealing against leaks to the outside. This is a very common approach. New York State has made free energy audits available to residential customers for over 10 years. I'll describe a few of the programs shortly, and what the guiding building science principles are behind them. But again, investments you make in plugging holes and adding insulation mean annual savings from every year after you install these upgrades. So this is really the lowest hanging fruit. And then we'll spend some time talking about heat pumps, which come in a couple of different flavors. We've got air source heat pumps, which we would distinguish from what most people know of heat pumps from 20 years ago. These are different. These are designed to work in very cold temperatures, and they're very quiet. I'll spend some time talking about them shortly. And ground source heat pumps, and the titles describe the difference. Air source heat pumps gather heat from the ambient air. Ground source heat pumps gather heat from the ground, and both systems make that energy available at usable temperatures inside your home. I'll touch on, but won't spend too much time unless people have specific questions about biomass systems as well. And those include EPA-approved pellet stoves, wood gasification boilers, and pellet boilers, both of which require thermal storage to maintain low emissions. And I'll also touch on briefly on heat pump domestic hot water heaters, same technology, just used to make hot water. So you've heard me say heat pumps a lot. While I've got this screen up, I want to just touch on the refrigeration cycle that's used in heat pumps. As I say that, hopefully most of you understand that this is technology that's been around for decades, right? If you have it already in your home, your refrigerators and freezers use this exact technology to condition space inside an insulated box. And it uses the physical properties of refrigerant, which is very different than water, to actually move heat, not make heat. And by doing that, we get into efficiencies that go far beyond an electric plug-in space heater or electric baseboard. I'll talk about this a little bit more shortly, or if folks have questions about refrigeration. But let me slide back to insulation and air sealing. As I mentioned, New York State has free energy audits for any home. The program that you would apply to varies based on your household income and the number of folks in your home, but they all essentially do the same thing. They're looking for quantifying and identifying air leaks to the outside. That's often done with a blower door as a means of quantifying air leakage to the outside. They're looking for missing insulation in your basement, in your sidewalls, in your attic. It includes inventories typically of your lighting and your appliances, looking for ways to increase efficiency through LED lighting or Energy Star appliances. And it looks at not only the operational cost and efficiency of your mechanical space heating and cooling systems, as well as domestic hot water, but what the combustion safety is around those if you have fossil fuel-based appliances. So there's a health and safety element to most energy audit systems to ensure that if you have natural gas or fuel oil, there aren't leaks, and that things are combusting appropriately and drafting through your appliance. As I mentioned, the residential energy audit programs split into 3 categories based on income. I'll show you a table next that breaks those down specifically for residents in Otsego County and neighboring counties. But you can see actually if you follow these what the marketing experts call swim lanes, as you go from left to right in these lanes, you can see in the first box is the specific name of the program that you're eligible for, and then what the essential program benefits are based on your eligibility. So if you're a low-income household, you can apply to the Empower program for a free energy study that will cover 100% of the cost to improve prescriptive measures in your home. If you fall into the medium income category, the program, the Assisted Home Performance Program, will cover 50% of the cost, and make available to you a loan program through Green Jobs, Green New York financing to actually finance your portion if you don't want to put any money down. And then finally, for market rate homes, there is a program called Comfort Home. It's about to be expanded into the Mohawk Valley Economic Region, the 6 counties in the Mohawk Valley Economic Region, and can provide up to $4,000 in grant monies to homes to add insulation and do air sealing. Again, Green Jobs, Green New York financing incentives are also available to market rate homes to cover homeowner portions of upgrades to either envelope or to heat pump conversion, or both. This is this year's operating table for eligibility. It's a little bit complicated. What I want to tell you is that, you know, if your income falls into prorated by the number of people who live in your home, that's the number across the top, falls under the sorry about that. If your household income prorated by a number of individuals in your house falls under the amounts specified in line 1, the 60% state median income, you're eligible for the Empower program, and 100% coverage by NYSERDA for prescriptive improvements. If your household income falls under the 120%, above 60%, but under the 120%, which is the third line of numbers prorated by household income, you're eligible for the Assisted Home Performance. And if your household income exceeds the 120% state median income, you would qualify for the market rate program. Heat pumps, cold climate air source heat pumps. These are not the heat pumps, as I mentioned before. These are not the heat pumps that, you know, if you've been down to Florida or you go to the Mid-Atlantic and there's a big square box and it sounds like a tornado taking off when the things turn on next to the house, that can be either an air conditioner or a heat pump, and same technology, but it's not designed for our cold climate. So they don't work down below 50 degrees for providing heat, and they're pretty noisy. Today's cold climate air source heat pumps have been perfected by a variety of manufacturers, mostly in Asia, where they've sold millions of these, and they are the predominant heating and cooling system available to most households. And they consist either of the configuration you see at the top, an outdoor unit connected to typically a high wall head. It could be a ceiling recess or a floor standing unit. And what that outdoor unit does is it collects heat in the heating season from the ambient temperature by absorbing energy in the refrigerant that runs through a coil in there, compressing that refrigerant that is boiled or vaporized, and then capturing the higher grade quality heat that comes off of reducing the pressure and returning the heated vapor to a liquid. It releases a lot of heat that then is pumped into the room using the fan coil or the high wall head that's shown on the right hand side. There are whole house ducted units that use the same technology. That's what is shown in the bottom left corner, an outdoor unit connected to an air handler with a heat exchanger. And those are available as retrofit technology or for existing ductwork, assuming, of course, that your ductwork is adequate to and meets modern duct design requirements. I put together here a list of essentially system benefits and some limitations with each of these technologies. The cold climate air source heat pumps operate at efficiencies between typically 150 and 300% efficient. And I'm sure most of you are having the reaction that I did, which is how in the world can a heating appliance have some efficiency above 100%, right? Because all of us typically are aware of our fossil fuel heating boiler or furnace that's 87 or 80% efficient. If you've got a high efficiency propane unit, maybe it's 92 or 95% efficient. And here's the difference. Those fossil fuel appliances burn fuel to make heat, and some of that heat is lost through the chimney. Heat pumps don't make heat, they move heat. And 150% to 300% efficiency means for every unit of electricity that's used to run the heat pump, it's collecting 1.5 to 3 units of usable energy that's converted to space heat. And that's why you get these efficiencies that are so much greater. And this is how we overcome the bias. We all know that electric heat has historically been one of the most expensive ways to heat a home. And so while we're talking about heat pumps, this is an all electric heating system, but because it operates at such higher efficiencies, it's a much more affordable and cheaper way to actually heat and, by the way, cool your home than a typical electric resistance heat or electric baseboard heat. By the way, electric baseboard heat, let's say you're on Otsego Electric, 100% efficient. 100% of the energy that comes through the wire to the baseboard is converted into usable heat. So you can see that an air source heat pump is going to operate at significantly higher efficiencies than your electric resistance heat. The other thing that's totally amazing, and I agree that this seems like voodoo, is that these heat pumps work in heat pump mode to very cold temperatures. I had listed here that a minimum temperature of minus 18 degrees Fahrenheit. There are some manufacturers that now have equipment that works down to minus 20, minus 23 degrees Fahrenheit. And the reason they can do this is because the boiling point, the phase change temperature of the refrigerants that's used in these appliances is minus 55 degrees. So as long as you can absorb heat and change the refrigerant from a liquid to a gas and then compress that, we can gather heat under this heat pump technology. So air source heat pumps, very efficient cooling as well as heating. They were essentially originally designed really to condition spaces and not necessarily whole houses. And you can imagine in a very large, very complex house, having a whole bunch of heads, like I showed you, those high wall heads in every room in order to ensure comfort in every room. So it can get a little bit clumsy and complicated if you try and convert an entire house to air source heat pump heating and cooling. These products really shine, and Charlie Shine is going to chat a little bit about his experience in his house. But these systems really shine in terms of being able to add a lot of comfort to rooms, particularly those that have historically been difficult to heat or cool due to lack of adequate distribution. The other thing I want to really emphasize is that these systems are very quiet. It's amazing. If you've never been around one before, I encourage you to ask a friend, ask a neighbor, to listen to theirs. The outdoor unit's quiet, the indoor unit's quiet. It's pretty amazing. And as I've mentioned, this is all using current refrigeration technology. So it's proven. This is not new technology. This is, you're not a guinea pig by adopting these systems in your home. As I mentioned, it gets a little cumbersome to try and adopt air source heat pumps to a whole house solution. But that's only, when you get into the much larger building spaces or very complex building spaces. Historically, heating contractors who don't like to get called in the middle of the night when it's really cold outside have encouraged homeowners to have a secondary backup form of heat. So in case it gets down to that -14, -15, -18 degrees outside, the system is not struggling to keep up. And an appropriately designed system ought not to require a backup form of heat, but it's not uncommon for contractors to want to essentially cover their butts to ensure comfort. And then the other thing that I actually want to point out is that these appliances, particularly because there's an element of the system that sits outside, have a lifespan that's a little bit shorter than a typical fossil fuel boiler or furnace, right? You're looking at typically a 15 to 20 year lifespan for this technology. And that's mostly because, part of it lives outside. It's pounded by rain and sun and wind and elements. And so it's prone to have a shorter lifespan than equipment that lives inside your home. Ground source heat pumps. Exact same technology, except that instead of using ambient air to boil refrigerant, you're using water, typically with an antifreeze that's circulated in pipes that's buried in the ground. And because it's in the ground, it never sees anything colder than 30 degrees. So when it's -10 degrees outside, a ground source heat pump system is still only going to see at the coldest time of year 30 degrees. Because it sees higher temperatures, it works at higher efficiencies. And so you see efficiencies that are significantly higher for ground source heat pumps than you do for air source heat pumps. Excuse me. Like air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps turn right around and do very efficient cooling. They simply have a reversing valve, and they reverse the process and reject heat to the ground. But unlike air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps can also help make domestic hot water. They're really designed as whole house solutions. They're ultimately scalable, and no matter how big and complex a building you have. They too are very quiet. The ground loop itself is made of pipe that's warranted for 50 years. It's expected to last 100 years. And because this equipment, the heat pump itself lives inside, it's expected to have a lifespan upwards of 25 years. When that heat pump fails, like a furnace or boiler, all you got to do is pull that heat pump out and put a new one in. As I'll get to shortly, the cost of a new ground source heat pump is pretty expensive, but that's because it often, you've got to include the cost of putting the pipe in the ground. That can be upwards of 50% of the total cost. And as well, there can be some expense actually modifying the inside distribution system to play nicely with heat pumps that make cooler temperature water. Excuse me. Ground source heat pumps are twice as expensive typically as air source heat pumps. They're expensive. If you're putting in a ground loop and putting in a horizontal loop field, they're disruptive. You're digging up a lot of your yard to put in the pipe. They sometimes, as I've explained, don't play so nice with existing duct or hydronic heat distribution systems. And so some modifications and expense have to be made to modify them in order for the system to work efficiently. And these are complex systems. In an air source heat pump system, the complexity is contained in the box. In ground source heat pump systems, some of that complexity is outside the box in terms of efficiently connecting and working with existing distribution system. As I mentioned, I'll touch on modern wood burning appliances, but I'm not going to spend too much time. This is actually an image of a wood gasification boiler. There are both indoor and outdoor wood boilers. There are outdoor wood gasification boilers that New York State Department of Environmental Conservation has approved. Gasification boilers are interesting. They are the solution to the smolder boxes that you used to see commonly across upstate New York. Rather than damping down an existing fire, these systems work by burning the wood entirely and then burning the smoke and soot in a secondary burn chamber that's much hotter. The trick to making this system work is connecting a insulated storage tank that can hold the water that's heated by burning this wood and the smoke completely. Hot, fast fire is much cleaner to burn. The trick then is holding on to the energy for distribution as the house and zones call for that heat, hence thermal storage. There's also pellet stoves. We've included pellet stoves in our Heat Smart campaign because there are some great incentives out there for EPA certified pellet stoves to the tune of $2,500 incentive on a $3,500 to $4,000 install for a new pellet stove. Pellets themselves are actually a heat eligible fuel source, and so they can be a great solution, a heat only solution, mind you, for low and medium income households. They do require the sweat equity of managing, 40-pound bags. There's a weekly ash dump typically, and those appliances are expected to last 15 to 20 years. I've talked about wood gasification boilers, and similar to them, there are pellet boilers, both of which use thermal storage as a way of maximizing the efficiency of the burn and the extraction of BTUs from the wood or pellet fuel source. There are some pretty dramatic savings should you go this route. If you're income eligible, 60% of your total system cost can be covered by NYSERDA. If you've got a commercial system, 75% of your system can be covered by NYSERDA. Again, these are heat only systems, but they can do 100% of your domestic hot water requirements as well. I just want to point out that for the pellet boilers in this category, we're not talking about 40-pound bags. We're talking about very, large bunkers or silos for bulk pellet storage with pneumatic automated delivery to the pellet boiler themselves. In the case of cordwood gasification boilers, you still have the sweat equity of humping wood to your boiler. And as I mentioned, they don't do air conditioning. So we're going to focus on heat pumps because, well, for a variety of reasons, right? They're cheaper to operate. We'll get into that in a second. They're easier to maintain than propane, than gas or fuel oil systems. They do both heating and cooling. They eliminate combustion inside your building. And it turns out by electrifying your heating and cooling system, by shifting to an electric-based heating system, we're able to actually offset the energy requirements to run those units using renewable and low carbon, no carbon energy sources, solar, hydro, wind, and nuclear, truthfully. And so it's heat pumps that are actually gonna help us achieve the carbon reduction goals of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act of 2019 here in New York State. Right? We're going to do two things simultaneously. We're going to electrify buildings using heat pumps, and we're going to green the grid. And by doing that, we reduce our fossil fuel consumption and our greenhouse gas emissions. So our motto around Heat Smart Mowhawk Valley is heat pumps are cheaper, cleaner, safer, smarter.
Bennett, I do have a graph of the step down on carbon. If that will help.
Sure.
I'm gonna just switch.
Can we present that at the end of this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, that would be fine.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, because you just right. I'm happy to answer questions, but this in my mind is like one of the important money shots, right? This is a bar graph showing the estimated or predicted cost of energy, the annual cost of energy for a house that consumes 850 gallons of fuel oil to heat this building for a year. And we're looking at the equivalent cost using a variety of different energy sources, the most expensive being propane. Right, so propane furnace and boilers are up around $3,500 a year. Wood stoves continue to be, wood, as we all know around here, is the cheapest way to do it, but very close behind wood are the no sweat equity air and ground source heat pump systems. The other thing that I'd point out, right, is a ground source heat pump system that costs about $1,000 to heat this home for a year is going to save you $2,500 versus a propane furnace. So you can imagine, even if you end up spending, let's say after all the incentives, after all the rebates and tax credits are exhausted, you still end up paying $25,000 out of pocket for a ground source heat pump system. You're going to pay that off in 10 years, right? Versus your old propane furnace, because you're spending $2,500 less a year just for space heating. So I wanted to throw that out. As you can see, natural gas, right? Gas furnace, gas boiler. Because gas is artificially cheap, the energy savings versus heat pumps is not as dramatic, but it's there. So if you are on natural gas, but your existing furnace or boiler is coming to the end of its life, think long, hard, and do some research before you invest in a replacement system and explore your options around heat pumps. You'll save money. So we've talked about operational cost savings. One of the things that people really get worked up about when they look at the cost of these systems is the upfront cost. And I wanted to just walk through a little bit of this table, which is the incentives that are available through, in this case, these are National Grid, but they're identical for NYSEG customers as well. So if you do if you look at the cold climate air source heat pumps, there's two different tiers of rebates. If you just installed a single unit or a unit that had a couple of heads that worked in a couple of rooms, you would expect a $500 rebate if you used and this is very important, you got to use a participating contractor, a contractor who signed a participation agreement with the utility to abide by best practices and to subjugate themselves to QA/QC procedures run by the utility to make sure they're putting in systems and following appropriate manufacturer and technology norms. If you did a partial load heating system, you'd expect $500 per outdoor unit. If you put in a system that was sized to handle 90% or more of your total heating requirement for your building, you'd get a rebate that's based on the total capacity of the system. And I have an example later on, but suffice it to say that typically a house in Otsego County is going to see a rebate of around $4,000 for a whole house air source heat pump system. The ground source heat pump systems are, by definition, a whole house solution. And so they also have a rebate that's based on system capacity, but but it's a higher, excuse me, unit rebate. So you get more money for a ground source heat pump system from the utility rebate. So for that same house that would see a $4,000 air source heat pump rebate system, you'd be looking at a $6,000 rebate for ground source heat pump systems. And then there are rebates available for different types of heat pump technology to make domestic hot water. Great. So you're going to save money with a heat pump system. You can get some rebates from the utilities to help you afford it, but you're still going to pay some for your system out of pocket. NYSERDA has a suite of loan products to help you spread the cost of your system out over time using one of these loans. And what's really great is particularly that on-bill recovery loan. If your fuel source currently is something other than natural gas, it's likely that you could have a cash flow neutral or cash flow positive loan. And this is kind of weird to say, but it's a loan, but it's not debt. Being cash flow neutral means you're actually paying for the cost of the loan of the energy you save by installing the equipment. So I'll just throw that out there. This can get a little bit complicated. I'm not going to spend too much time on these loan products. There's a lot of literature online with the website I've provided to you, the URL in this slide, has a lot of information around eligibility, etc. I'm not going to belabor that, but suffice it to say that NYSERDA's thought of all the various elements to help you afford these clean energy technologies. So let's take a second. Let's add up some of the incentives that I've just gone through, right? And essentially, I've put together ballpark costs. This is for the same house, but speccing out a system for an air source heat pump versus a ground source, right? We get a little wonky here. Suffice it to say that for this house, typically a typical average home in Otsego County has a heat load requirement of about 4 tons, which is about 48,000 BTU. That ends up costing about $18,000 for a whole house air source heat pump system, a rebate of around $4,800 and a net cost of $13,000. If you went with a ground source, same house, the total cost to install a ground source heat pump system is going to be twice as much. But not only do you have a higher utility rebate, ground source heat pump systems are eligible for a federal tax credit of 26%. And that actually has been extended for the duration of this calendar year, 2021. It drops to 22% of the total system cost in 2022. And is set to sunset in 2023. We'll see if that happens or if the federal government extends these benefits. But the point I'm trying to make here is that given both the federal tax credit and the higher utility rebate, the upcharge between a more efficient ground source heat pump system and an air source heat pump system starts to become less of an obstacle than the air source heat pump system alone. And I don't want to sound like a used car salesman, but right now NYSERDA is running a special on heat pump systems for low and medium income households. So if you fit into either if your household income is less than that 120% state median income that I showed you in that table before, you could be eligible to actually get a significant additional benefit, additional grant on top of the utility rebate and the tax credit if you're talking about ground source heat pumps to put in either an air or ground source heat pump system in your house. So if you think you might be eligible and you're interested in this program, please just reach out to me offline after this presentation and we can talk about the steps that are required to get this going. Is it bureaucratic? Yeah, it requires the involvement of 2 different contractors typically, but essentially you can get a ground source heat pump system at no cost or very low cost if you qualify. So it might be worth signing up if you think you're eligible. Contractors is not a great slide. I apologize. This is a map of air source heat pump contractors. I just want to remind you that in order to harvest a utility rebate from NYSEG or National Grid, you need to use a participating contractor. And oh, by the way, if you're on Otsego Electric Co-op, you're not eligible for the utility rebate. Just so you know. And do they work? Well, I wouldn't be here if I didn't think they did. So you can certainly NYSERDA maintains a website of case studies. We maintain a website of case studies, of local case studies. I've mentioned to Susan, I'm ready to go. I've got queued up actually a whole second PowerPoint presentation if folks want to see it. That talks about case studies from installs of both air and ground source heat pump systems, actually, as well as just simple insulation and air sealing upgrades as well, if folks have time and are interested after we finish here. And this is my contact information. Just so you know, I have no skin in the game. I don't get a cut from any of the contractors installing systems in your house. I'm funded by NYSERDA to be available to educate folks about these technologies, the incentive programs, and the financing. This is my contact information. There's also our website, which has a lot of detailed information about the technology. And feel free to reach out with any kind of questions or follow-up information or some guidance as to how best to proceed for you and your home. So with that, I'm going to take a second and give Susan a chance to actually put up the graphic that she had mentioned. Do I need to stop sharing, or can you just override me?
I think I can just override you. Let me try that. Shift some things around. I have two screens.
Bennett, while Susan's doing that, a question came in from one of our participants saying that we'll be building a house this spring and intend to use air source heat pumps for our heat. What's the best hot water source? Should I use hot water on demand, or what would you suggest?
So that's a great question. And of course, like any engineering question, it kind of depends. If you're building a new house and you're gonna have an unheated basement, right? An unheated but not leaky basement because it's new construction, I'd encourage you to explore an air source heat pump hot water heater that can go in that basement. If you're going to condition the basement, if you're going to have conditioned space throughout the building and no unconditioned mechanical room space, I actually might encourage you to simply install a standard electric hot water tank. I know we've all been trained to understand that electric hot water heaters are inefficient, and that's true when they live in very cold, leaky basements. But when you actually stick those appliances in conditioned space, they lose very little energy. And I'd encourage you to stick with electric, because if you do that, you're in a position to offset the energy you use to make hot water with either grid generated renewable energy or potentially community. You could sign up with community solar to reduce your energy consumption and offset it more with solar. Or if you're in a position, you could put a rooftop or your own solar system up around your house to offset your energy consumption around domestic water. I would shy away from an on-demand system in new construction simply because you're either going to use fossil fuel or you're going to use electric, and the issues around hard water, I guess we were chatting about this before we got started, but hard water is pretty common around here. And so the on-demand hot water heating appliances tend to gum up with the mineral content. So I tend to direct people towards electric standard resistant hot water heaters, particularly in new construction and when they're in conditioned space. Happy to follow up with whoever asked that question if that wasn't clear or they want to have a fuller discussion.
This person mentions now that they will have no basement.
Right. So, maybe I'm backtracking a little bit. If they don't have a lot of so again, if they have some space to put in a standard electric hot water heater, that's what I do. And if space is a concern, then maybe they do actually want to go with an on-demand system. I'd encourage them to stay away from fossil fuels, which means an electric on-demand system, which can work, but just know that you're signing up for pretty regular descaling maintenance of your system to keep it from gumming up.
And this person lives in Shenango County. Does that make any difference? Should she contact like Heat Smart Shenango, or what should you do with that?
We're not that territorial. I'm happy to work with you. If you want to reach out to Heat Smart, I think Shenango is Southern Tier. That's fine. Neither of us are gonna worry too much about who you end up chatting with.
Bennett,
I'm more than happy. Yeah, go ahead.
along those same lines, we did have somebody who said they're in Delaware County, and that was kind of missing from the map, and they wanted to know if they were interested, who do they contact? Would they just contact?
I'm more than happy to work with them. You won't offend anybody. Technically, Delaware County is in southern tier as well, but truthfully, for heat pump installs, they've been calling us to know what contractors are available. So
Right. Okay.
please
that's
just reach
good.
out to me. Nobody's gonna be too worked up about it.
So I do want to just very briefly, because I've talked about this before in other presentations, just the importance of tracking your household carbon and trying to get baseline figures and see what your starting point is, because the goal is over the next 20 years to keep reducing those numbers of carbon emissions coming from, collective households within our region. So we basically became a partner as a nonprofit with Cure 100, which is Communities United to Reduce Emissions 100%. And one of the things that they provide is a carbon tracker tool. So we have information on our website. It's available through this little green C button that's up in the top. I couldn't find an icon that was really appropriate, so I used a copyright icon. But if you click on that, it will bring you to this page. And this will give you a little bit about the app and kind of how it works. It's a web-based app. Any, caveats and things that you need to know basically about security and things like that. If you need guidance, I do have office hours that I've made available. And then basically going into the carbon tracker. So the way this works is if you're coming through your community, basically it tracks by community. So if you're coming through the DOAS website, it's going to track the information and the data from users that come through our website. So we want to track for our region. And we're really hoping that people will go through here and do this through the website. So basically you set up a profile. It likes a Gmail account, basically, and it makes it easy to connect via a Gmail account. They give you a questionnaire where you go through different pieces in regards to transportation and your vehicles, heating and cooling, what kind of system you currently have, how much you spend per year, what your, how many gallons of fuel oil do you burn if you have a fuel-based system, what's your electricity usage, how do you handle food and waste, goods and services, and then zip code home overhead is kind of about your community. So once you fill that in, basically it will give you a My Carbon result. So where your starting point is, and this is mine, and it's kind of embarrassing because we're way off the chart over here. Heating and cooling, some of my numbers may not be 100% accurate. I have to go through and just validate those. But I mean, if my carbon currently is 23,000, 23 tons of carbon, it's going to give me some information about things I can do. So if I look at heating, it's telling me, okay, well, here's your propane usage because I have a gas stove, and here's my fuel oil. Basically, this is supposed to be average for people in my zip code, which I don't believe this is accurate, but it's taken from national data sources. And then it basically, how do you reduce? So low cost, low effort, how do you, prepare your radiators so that you lose less heat? Talking about sealing your envelope and going through NYSERDA's energy audits, and then talking about, improving your internal systems. And then this is the graph, basically, just to show kind of the difference in carbon emissions. So, an oil system versus a natural gas system, which does have leakage, basically doesn't really save the carbon emissions. Going to propane is that step down, but heat pumps put you at practically zero for carbon emissions. So each different segment of this app will basically overview similar types of things, and it will give guidance and links to resources. The transportation page will give you the links to, the tax credits and rebates for NYSERDA vehicles, or like the Drive Clean programs, rebates and federal and state tax credits that can come from that. So that was all I wanted to share on that. I just would ask if, to come to the website and start a profile and fill it as you go. And then as you improve and make those changes, you can modify those numbers and see what the difference is. You'll watch that carbon emission input start to come down. So I won't take any more time on that and go back to some question and answers.
Bennett, do you want me to talk about my house now?
Charlie, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So folks, just to give you a little bit of background, our house is an older house. It was built in the 1880s. So it has like a fieldstone laid basement, and it has timbers for floor joists. It's an older house. And it was added on to a number of times over the years. It's definitely a very leaky house, and maybe I should have done an energy audit first, but we didn't. We just went ahead and installed the heat pumps. Our gas furnace is about 20 years old, which means it's getting near to the end of its life. And that was part of what motivated us to do this. But at first we had thought we were just going to install a heat pump as sort of additional heating to the gas furnace. And what we've done though, is that now we pretty much heat our whole house with this heat pump. We have one outdoor compressor and 3 internal condensers, or they call them mini splits or heads. There's different names for them. We have one in our dining room, one in our den. Those are both downstairs. And then we have one upstairs as well in our bedroom. And those 3 units for us heat pretty much the whole house for us. We have about 1,500 square feet or so. So that gives you an idea of the space that we're heating with those 3 units. And it really does work. Even in the coldest weather, we've had really cold weather this winter. We just installed these in November. And we had some really cold weather during this winter. And only on a few days of the really, really coldest days did we end up turning on our original old gas furnace. We had, before this, we had gas forced hot air with a duct system, and it's not a very comfortable way to heat the house. We didn't like it. Now we have only used it just a little bit on the very, very coldest days. And in terms of the cost, this cost us just between $9,000 and $10,000 for the whole installation. And that included, the parts are warranted for 11 years, and this included an 11-year warranty for labor as well. So it seemed to me to be a pretty good deal. And in terms of the money that we've saved, NYSEG reads our meters every 2 months. And so, for example, in this past January, February 2-month total, our total bill for all of our utilities, lights, hot water, and heating was about $350 for the 2 months. 2 years ago, we had a January and a February that had very much the same average daily temperatures as this year, because I keep records of all that stuff. I used to be a math professor, so I do that kind of stuff anyway. And in that year, we spent over $425. So we saved $70. And the real kicker is, we used to keep our house at like 64 degrees, turn it down to 60 at night. We were cold. But now we keep the house at around 67 degrees. So it costs us less money to have the house warmer and much more comfortable. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about my experience offline. You could send me an email, that would be fine. One other thing I should mention is that we signed up for electricity from a solar farm. So we've gone from heating our house with natural gas, which, as you can see from Susan's graphs, is a big carbon cost, to now heating it with electricity and solar electricity. So we've gone very, very green, and it feels really good.
There was one question that hasn't been answered at this point. In regards to the federal tax credit, can you split that out over several years, or do you lose that after the first year if you can't use it?
You can roll it over multiple years. I answered that question, but I think I limited it to a private response to whomever asked it.
Oh, okay. I didn't see it. Thank you.
No, right.
Susan, you're muted.
Oh, so I was. Any other questions for Bennett for this evening? I will have links to the Heat Smart Mowhawk Valley website and Bennett's contact information, and I will post that on the page on the DOAS website where we have our webinars listed. So we'll post a recording of the webinar, and then we'll post additional resources. So I'll try to link you out to some of the resource pages from Mohawk Valley along with Bennett's contact information. So yes, well, we appreciate people's interest in this and attending, and we're really hoping that maybe we can identify avenues to really, like work together to help more people within our communities to understand what the benefits are, how it impacts climate change and birds ultimately in the future, and see if we can find some, good collective examples of how other communities are getting their residents to switch over. So, yeah, and for those who are installing new systems, definitely keep in touch with us. I know a couple of people who are in the program this evening are in the Climate Action Network that we've set up through Delaware-Otsego Audubon. I'll send invitations out to everybody if you want to participate there. Bennett is in that network, so if you have heat and cooling related questions, you can post a question and continue this conversation in that topic area, which I think will be a good resource for people and a way to continue to share our experiences and ideas and solutions. So that's the goal. Great. Well, I will say thank you, Bennett. We appreciate your time, definitely, and your expertise. I think maybe at some point what I can do, if I can't find it, like I'll try to link those resource pages, both for the financial incentives and for, do you have your presentation listed for those case studies? Like residential and business case
I can
studies
provide that. I mean, I can make that available. That's not a problem.
That would be great, because I'd
Sure.
love to include that in the additional resources section on
Yep.
that
Yep.
on that webinar page.
Yep. I think it's helpful for people to see what like what Charlie's talking about, what it's done for their energy bills.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really critical for people to see. And the other thing that that when COVID's over, what we were doing prior was actually running energy tours. The other thing that's nice is for people to actually go into homes where the technology is installed and look at what the equipment looks like, listen to what it sounds like, as well as see what it does for energy bills. It's always helpful.
Yeah, and talking to real world people, here locally who have that experience like Charlie's, that basically have done this and can give you firsthand,
Testimonial.
information about their experience, I think is a really valuable thing.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yay. Well, thank you again. I always hate ending these meetings because it always feels so very abrupt. But I am just going to go ahead and end the meeting, and thank you all again. Thank you, Charlie and Becky and Catherine also for participating with us tonight on the Audubon end. So, all right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Night, night.